My name is Carrie MacLeod, and I direct a research project called Dancing at the Crossroads, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But first, I want to ask you, what moves you? What really, really moves you? And where do your impulses come from in your body to shift states, to be receptive, to be open, to engage in the face of difficulty? Where are those places? If I'm to talk or speak about dance and conflict transformation, I first have to listen. Listen to those subtle places in the skeletal and muscular systems, those places that host the unspeakable parts of our lives, the entrenched positions, the essential worldviews, the unconscious identities that hold us in place, and can be a place of intractability, a place of inertia, but also a place of mobility, a place of freedom. And so this juxtaposition of intractability and mobility is what the impetus for this Dancing at the Crossroads research was about. The tension, that place in between action and non-action, inertia and impasse. When does conflict start to dissipate? And when is it frozen in time, so it actually freezes our bodies in time? The Dancing at the Crossroads initiative is out of the University of British Columbia, and it's been a 5-year beautiful social experiment, kinesthetic experiment, bringing dancers, conflict resolution practitioners together, lawyers, mediators, students, artists from all backgrounds, NGO leaders, to look at the body as the common denominator, to ask, how can we bring the body back to conflict resolution, conflict transformation, dialogue? Where has the body been? So much of rational cognitive transformation, conflict transformation processes have been from the neck up. How ironic. The body is implicated in all of our relationships. So we came together and said, let's create a physical and kinesthetic and aesthetic vocabulary to bring the body back into the picture of conflict, to understand that our impulses, that our worldviews always come back to an embodied place. And so we found something very interesting in this process, led by Margaret Gillis, Sarah Chase, prominent dancers and movers in the field. And we found that the very elements of dance, the body, energy, space, time, are the same elements that are often contested and compromised in the midst of conflict. And we thought this is a very interesting correlation to start building and investigating. So we wanted to create a kinesthetic counter-narrative to all of the conventional conflict transformation discourse. And so we looked at the body, and we said the body is a site of deprivation, violation, trauma, but it's also the site of healing, resilience, reconciliation, a vessel of possibility, a catalyst for beauty. And the very language of conflict is so loaded in the body. I felt a load off my shoulders when we resolved that. Something inside of me, in my stomach, just dissolved when we signed the peace agreement. I feel off center. I'm not aligned with what you're saying. It's body language, it's kinesthetic. So it's interesting, the body's front and center, and it's always working on our behalf in the midst of conflict. The sympathetic nervous system coming in with the fight or flight response, actually stopping blood to the frontal lobe of the brain and inhibiting our decision-making capacities. And meanwhile, the parasympathetic nervous system coming in and saying, rest, digest, be with what is. The body always working on our behalf in homeostasis. But homeostasis is not static. It's alive, it's vibrant, and it's moving. And we are moving with that in conflict resolution. What can dancers teach us about space? Conflict is always spatial. The terrain of the body is the the physical terrain that is occupied in the world. We know all about occupation in different parts of the world through conflict. Space and spatial dynamics are at stake. And same with this notion of dance being a very, very interesting insight into how we occupy and be with and work with and shape space. Dancers are thought to have the most keenly attuned sense of proprioception of all artists, the sensibility of our body in space. And so when in conflict we feel backed into a corner, we feel like we don't have enough room to breathe, we literally don't have enough room to think. Starting to think about how to leverage that sense of being stuck through spatial dynamics and dance becomes really pivotal in this discussion. And it's interesting. The parietal lobe, the place in our brain that is responsible for organization and movement, is highly connected to proprioception. And they're starting to see that dancers are actually repairing this part of the brain. So this actual notion of where we are, the ability to navigate ourselves in space, is being cultivated through dance. And the ability to not navigate ourselves in space is often the root of conflict. We lose our sense of bearings with ourselves and with one another. So we come back to the body. Another amazing element of dance is time, and it's often a part of conflict that is lost. We lose our memory when trauma or crisis becomes into a heightened state. And the actual structural changes happen in the limbic system because of this. We can't remember certain periods of our lives that are really steeped in trauma and conflict. And yet, it's really interesting. The hippocampus, the place that really processes memory in our brain, is capable of generating neurons through movement, through kinesthetics, through dance. So actually they're starting to see now that decision-making capacities and the actual ability to recall and remember events is cultivated through gesture. And this has huge implications for people that have been through trauma and have to recall events. Instead of re-traumatizing yourself or others to say, tell me what happened, you're relating to what happened in a different way. It can be re-traumatizing to reiterate line by line what happened to you if you were traumatized. But if you can move it in other ways, you're cultivating a new space, a new openness, new choices to how to relate to the past. So history becomes alive in new ways. It's not just a didactic entity that has potential for re-traumatization. Dance can recall memories, can recall events in ways that can't be recalled in just a single conversation. And this is really important, I think, especially working with refugees that are preparing for hearings, people that are needing to reiterate experiences that are painful. How to recreate a relationship to the past is paramount. And finally, energy. We look at energy, the ensemble, the power of ensemble, the power to make and create work with people that is not about the problem necessarily, it's not about the trauma, it's not about the situation, it's about enlivening a new choreography. And the potential of negative space in dance, the potential to work with what isn't, is just as important as working with what is, to build a choreography of consensus with what's around us. So those are just a few little nodes to keep us thinking.